Hi folks, welcome. This is an Aries, Ascendant, Moon, and Sun reading for the month of December. And I'm using the Gemini Astrology Tarot spread that I created recently for just this purpose. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check out the video I did explaining the spread, also on my YouTube page. And I'll put that in the description below as well. So we're going to be reading from here as your ascendant, because this is where Aries always is in this spread. And then we'll go clockwise and do the 12 astrological houses. And we will be talking about everything that is to come, at least generally, for those of you who have prominent Aries in your chart for the month of December. Cool. So the first card we perhaps want to talk about before we get to anything else is the 13th card here at the center. This is sort of the overarching theme of this month for you, and it's a theme of friendship, coming together, harmony, co-creativity, and union, and so on and so forth. It's also a card that generally denotes pleasure and desire. So that's definitely a major theme for you, and we'll start to see how that ties in as we go around the spread. And I haven't interpreted this spread yet at all. I've just laid out the cards prior to starting the video because, simply speaking, it was easier to do that. So I don't even know what's in store for you yet, but let's find out together, huh? So we have the Four of Wands here reversed as the ascending sort of ascendant. This is kind of your body and what you're dealing with and so on. Directly. It's perhaps the second most important card to the 13th card within the domain of this spread. So this card is interesting because it stands in kind of sharp contrast to this card, where being upside down, right, we have perhaps some blockage of whatever this signifies, and we have these two figures here. For those of you, familiar with this, you already know that, but the Four of Wands is definitely speaking to, getting your affairs in order, beautifying your home and life. And so perhaps there's a little bit of a conflict right now doing that, since the card's upside down. And we're going to see that corroborated by a couple different cards that are aspecting. We see that the Two of Pentacles is aspecting the ascendant here. And so there's some concern over finances. Can I have the beautiful life that I really want to have? And perhaps this involves a specific person that you have in mind, whether it's somebody you've been dating or somebody you're really, really, really interested in. But you're concerned about money. You're concerned about how money fits into this. How do I juggle my financial life with my relationship life? Or maybe there's a feeling of sort of self-consciousness and that kind of a thing. The Knight of Swords reversed is also aspecting. So on some level, there's maybe a desire to rush into things, or to really take charge of things and explore things anew. But again, there's some trepidation on that part for some reason. I'm not sure why. We'll get more into it as we go on. It'll probably be revealed, but there's something about having a strong urge to rush into things, but holding back on that. Again, possibly because of financial concerns. And the last card to aspect is the good old Ten of Swords, this time upright. So with these other cards reversed and the Ten of Swords being upright, it's interesting because it's suggesting that, this is kind of a major factor holding you back. Perhaps you're overly concerned with just total annihilation or defeat if you try to go forward with getting your affairs in orders and manifesting a more, happy, joyous, beautiful life for yourself. You're perhaps worried about the past, about past failures or situations where things really just went very south, very sour. And not to get too ahead of myself, but we do have the Devil card aspecting the Ten of Swords card here. And the Devil is upside down the way I pulled them out. I know it's kind of hard to tell which ones are reversed and which ones aren't, but based on the way I pulled them out, I know, and how I'm looking at them from the side here. So you'll just have to trust me on that, okay? But yeah, the fact that the devil reversed is aspecting this is interesting because it's feeding into this deep seated sort of fear scape, this deep seated fear of things going wrong and so on. And we also, interestingly enough, we also have it looks like we have the tower also aspecting here this card as well. Um, so there's kind of, yeah, there's kind of a sense of like, am I going to fail if I go ahead and do this? Thinking about the worst, dwelling on the negatives instead of the positives. Um, and so whenever such a situation arises and whatnot, I am of the opinion that, you know, this is largely overblown, this fear that we all get of like, everything's just going to crumble and be completely destroyed, and then I'm going to be miserable and so on and so forth. Okay. It's really kind of just a fabrication of the mind. And so, you know, I would kind of recommend focusing more on the natural like power you have to take action and to just kind of break free of any sort of overly stifling or logical emotional pattern with regard to kind of getting your affairs in order and sort of taking a risk and that sort of a thing. So that's what I would suggest there. I didn't say this at the outset, but you know, even though the middle card and the ascendant are naturally perhaps the most important cards in this spread, really the areas where the major arcana show up are actually going to be the most important. And you have 4 major arcana in your monthly spread, so that's quite a lot. You know, that does not happen in every spread, as some of you may know. So we're going to actually skip around a bit and take a look at those areas. I think it's I want to, you know, I want to draw attention to the Lovers card, which is kind of complementing this card here. They're, you know, they have a similar energy, and the Lovers card is right side up. So again, this brings us back to this theme of desire, of romance, of, you know, kind of leaping into new territory and so on. But what's interesting is the Lovers card is in the 6th house, which isn't really a house that's naturally conducive to such an energy. It's kind of like having Venus in the 6th house, right? Because the 6th house has a lot to do with self-improvement, with challenges, and with more mundanely speaking, enemies and disease and things like that. So on some level, it's suggesting that you're going to have to put in quite a lot of work if you want to be a student of love in this month to come. You know, it's not going to be something that easily comes to you. And if you run ahead of yourself too much, you know, perhaps what the Knight of Swords is signifying right there next to the Lover's card, right? And like I said earlier, this is a strong card, and it's sort of unfortunate that it's, you know, it's suggesting that it's a bit blocked. But on the other hand, actually, you know, I'm gonna kind of trace my steps back. Perhaps that energy is not blocked. Perhaps what it is instead is a tendency to rush too forcefully into sexual and romantic situations, and that's sort of been getting in your way because it's in the 6th house, right? So there's a tendency to rush too head first into that, and kind of, you know, your ideas might, you know, push you ahead of yourself and take you out of what's really going on. So there's kind of like a naivete going on here, or a pattern of it that is, you know, perhaps it's from a long time ago. Perhaps it's something that you've been dealing with for a long time, but this month it's kind of showing its face more strongly. I think the Magician is funny here in the 3rd house of siblings and neighbors, and of course also like personal beliefs, in contrast to the 9th house, which is kind of just the spiritual religious doctrines, irregardless of what we think of them. The Magician here upside down could easily suggest that there's, you know, some sort of strange, out of the ordinary things going on in your environment and your everyday life, neighborhood, with your peers, people you know, this month for you. You know, there's perhaps some meddling taking place and whatnot. And the Magician is really like, he's trying to do things, he's trying to manipulate things. And in the third house, which also has to do with personal efforts, right? This card may, upside down, may be suggesting that, there's going to be a tendency to meddle in affairs that you probably should just let take their own course and that sort of thing. It's almost like the Magician is trying to make this happen, so to speak, or he's trying to manipulate things so that they work out a certain way. But I really caution you again with like rushing into something romantic or sexual that comes up for you this month without really, thinking about it and contemplating it and making sure you're just taking the right step in whatever direction. It could be the type of thing where you just need to sit down and like meditate on it and wait for the answer to appear rather than rush into it. Because right after the Lovers, right, we've got the Tower. So we've got some kind of collapse, some kind of explosion happening, rushing in, having this experience, and the result is, well, it kind of blows up in your face perhaps. And even more so because this is the 7th house for Aries right here. So, we've got the potential for a real crisis coming to a head in matters specifically pertaining to relationships, right? This is kind of a big deal. So if you're watching this and, shit is already hitting the fan for you in your relationship life, whatever that is, okay, then you have an opportunity here to like really deal with it head on. And you're going to have the opportunity to, be more refined in your approach, not try to control things, not rush into things and so on. Especially, with the Devil card here influencing these kind of based on potentially like hatred and anger and stuff like that. Deep-seated unconscious stuff kind of at the root here, behind this card, right? It's behind it in the order that we put out the cards. So it's what precedes it and so on. For astrologers, it's the 12th house of this card, which is the 5th house, which is our power and creativity and joy and things like that. Maybe you're trying to break up somebody else's affair or something, but again, I strongly caution against that because the result is not exactly fun, okay? But the Tower is, of course, a great opportunity to like reassess your situation and what you've been doing and to figure out like why things haven't been working. It's an in-your-face kind of way of doing that. But ultimately, whatever you've been toying with here, I want to emphasize that whatever you've been toying with, forces you've been playing with, do have the potential in this month to really, either blow up in your face or just really come to the forefront of things. So it's not a matter of being careful. It's not a matter of being worried about that. It's just a matter of keeping that in mind when you go to act. That's all. That's all we're talking about, okay? There's no fatalism here. I promise you, there is no fatalism. The cards that are aspecting the Lovers card are these 4. So these 4 are all exerting an influence. We already talked to them about the Magician, right? And kind of about volition and trying to manipulate things. The Page of Pentacles, again, is reiterating this theme of, you're perhaps thinking about love and romance and desire too much in terms of finances. And that could also mean that you're maybe trying to get something out of it other than just the pure pleasure or the pure experience that it has to offer. You're trying to perhaps do something that's going to bring you new financial opportunities or whatnot. But there's, realistically speaking, there's not, that potential is kind of a fantasy. It's not really here, especially if we look at the 2nd house from the 7th, which is the 2 of Pentacles, which again, this is going to be, if you get involved with somebody, this is going to be a person who's fairly frugal, who's they don't really know what to do with their finances and that sort of thing. And of course, they're not really in a position to, take you on as a student or teach you anything about it. They're really not. The 2 of Swords, which is not reversed, actually, aspecting the Lovers. That's kind of interesting as well. It's another 2. We've got 3 2s out of 4. So two-ness is kind of a big factor here. And let's see, do we have all suites represented? I think we do, yeah. It looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 swords. And we have 1, 2 pentacles, and then we have 1, 2 cups. So we have the most of swords. And as you all know, swords can be very difficult. They're often the most difficult suite because they just, they're kind of showing like our mind and our ideas sort of getting in the way and interfering with our life on some level. So the Two of Swords aspecting the Lovers is, I don't know, it's kind of like a judgmentalism or something like that, harsh judgment of perhaps like your own desires and that sort of a thing. I'll have to come back to that. I'm not totally sure how that's manifesting. Okay, so yeah, we've got that kind of relationship stuff going on. Let's go to the fourth house. Now that we've talked about pretty much all the other major arcana briefly, let's go to the fourth house where we have the reversed devil. And the fourth house is our home life, our personal life, our contentedness, our happiness, our private life, things like that. And so for you this month, there's going to perhaps be a feeling of being chained to your home, of being really like locked in to things in a way that is really not productive of happiness. And, it's almost like whatever you're doing here too is kind of just leading to this, So I don't really like recommend continuing to meddle in things. If you're trying to practice magic or anything like that, you're going to want to reassess what you're doing because it's not working out. Okay. It's clearly making things quite hellish for you and perhaps suppressing your emotions. You may think, oh, I'm transcending my emotions and my problems and things and my vicissitudes. I'm healing. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm so great. Look at me, right? And that could be through magic. It could be through meditation. It could be through a variety of things. But in reality, that's not what's happening. You're digging yourself into a deeper hole. And so I strongly caution you, again, to just really reconsider what it is you're doing. You may be following some kind of a teacher or teaching and thinking it's really great and whatnot. Well, do a little research because a lot of these quote unquote great, wonderful teachers have about 50 to 100 skeletons in their closet and really aren't necessarily what they claim to be. So that might be something else to look into for you this month. Okay, let's return to your second house here, which we skipped over, the Three of Cups, right side up. So this is generally speaking auspicious for family situations and for financial situations, because that's what the second house primarily deals with. It's good food, good times, and so on. But we do have some pretty gnarly cards aspecting it. We've got the upside down devil. We've got the Tower, and we've got this Queen of Swords, which is interesting. So somebody is either petitioning you for help monetarily or demanding help monetarily or just really influencing you. And the Queen of Swords is not somebody who's going to be having a lot of fun, quote unquote. So this may be a mother figure or any sort of superior figure who has a lot of power, who is might be trying to guilt trip you or steer you in a more logical direction. Because this does have the potential with the other cards aspecting it, even though it's generally auspicious, it could also just show spending a lot of your time and money and energy on sort of fruitless pleasures or pleasures that aren't necessarily going to, bear a whole lot of fruit. And of course, this could get you into the lover's domain of, kind of getting you attached to a very pleasurable situation and scenario where you then end up, having debts over or difficulties over challenges because of it's that sixth house. So again, it's all kind of, it all kind of comes together as any tarot spread will. And I do want to emphasize that. With so many twos as well, there's kind of a indecisiveness present. It may be all too easy to sort of give way to just unconscious habits and behaviors and the influences of others upon you. You know, the 3 is really a card of like friends and stuff. So it's like, could be your friends kind of steering you to just sort of like have a good time and party and things like that. Um, and you know, you'll want to see my full moon YouTube video for Gemini full moon as well, because I do talk quite a bit about that as a theme for the Gemini full moon, and that, you know, that will relate to a lot of the things I'm saying here. Actually, there's quite a lot of relationship stuff in the full moon chart that is generally applicable to everyone. But you know, speaking of friends too, we've got, skipping ahead, we've got the 11th house here, okay, which is death, or metaphorically it's death, you know. Now it could refer to, you know, a close friend or somebody like that who's going through a really hard time. It could also refer to kind of a really negative influence from certain friends who are engaging in self-destructive behaviors and trying to kind of bring you into that themselves, because it does aspect your first house and so on. Although, you know, whether or not these friends are the same, probably not necessarily exactly the same, but it's all kind of running together, especially since these 2 cards are aspecting this right here. Again, the positive side of all this is that it's a great opportunity to deal with this stuff head on. The more we know, the more we can, you know, make conscientious choices and whatnot. Like, the fact of the matter is, skipping around to the 5th house of power and creativity and joy, right? You may want to shift your volition and, you know, take this situation by storm, as I described earlier, jump into this like kind of problematic romantic situation. You might be trying to fix things for yourself or somebody else. But really, this card would do so much better to be actually dealing with the devil, right? He's running away from his problems, right? So your power and creativity and expression, right, is almost like just running away from this deep-seated difficulty, darkness, kind of spellbound sort of place where, you know, when you're alone, this is kind of how you feel. And so the result is you're just rushing away from it. You're jumping into pleasures that are not going to lead you really anywhere good. So it'd be much better to tackle these things head on, to really interface with them, dialogue with them, you know, go to a therapist if you need to, go to a meeting, like an AA meeting, if that pertains to you, or, you know, get yourself talking to a good friend who will give it to you straight, maybe somebody you haven't talked to in a long time and whatnot, and you know, just kind of get that sorted out. And it may be the type of thing where, since these houses are opposite, right, maybe it's the grief amidst friends, or there's like a lack of hope you're experiencing, kind of like a hopelessness and a despair that you're also being influenced by, especially since these 2 cards do aspect one another and sort of, you know, join together. So I would say that very much fits in there. It makes a lot of sense and so on. Okay, next we're going to look at the 8th house, which is the unknown. And it can also be something that you're resisting, so to speak. And by resisting it, you are, of course, being driven by it. And again, this has to do with what I talked about at the beginning, very simply, is actually getting your finances and financial things really in order. If you do that, right, the result is actually fairly auspicious, even though it is it's an upside down card. But in this situation, I think it's the reversal is more like, you know, these 2 are looking at each other, talking to each other. Basically, whoever this person is, definitely an authority figure, because it's a queen and it's the 10th house of the spread. This person will take you more seriously and even guide you or accept your offering, so to speak, if you can get your stuff in order and stop sort of playing around and toying around and just being really passive and just not really doing anything. Okay, that's going to be really important. And as far as, you know, stuff that aspects that, you do have, yes, the queen aspects it. So whoever this is encouraging you to do that, kind of saying, what the hell are you doing? Get your shit in order. You know, they've got a hand up. They're like, what the hell are you doing? Just get your shit in order and then we can work together or whatever. Okay, you do have the devil aspecting again, good old devil. So on some level, again, there's just a lot of fear present for you in dealing with this. Perhaps there's kind of stubborn obstacles, negativity, pessimism, and so on that you're going to want to get around, or just at least interface with it. Sorry, you don't suppress it, you don't try to change it, you interface with it and learn what it's really about. And that's how you deal with it. The ninth house is the house of, God and prophecy and divination and fortune and things like that. So, there is, again, a marked possibility for good fortune, and for, if you heed sort of a higher calling, you will become open to new financial possibilities and learning situations, but not if you don't get it together. Not if you don't confront this sort of unknown territory of sort of balancing your accounts. Queen of Swords, right side up, again in the 10th house, aspected by the Knight of Swords, the 2 here, and actually the 3 of chalices. Actually, overall, fairly positive indications. It would suggest that you do have the power and the natural, like, good attitude to really get some things done, and to, take command of things and really sort your personal life in order, especially according to more like higher principles that are impersonal, like religious and philosophical principles that really have very little to do with you, but can help you get your public professional life in order and that sort of a thing. Or it may also pertain to, if you have a job right now, and you have a lot of power in it, but you're kind of feeling a little bit bored by it. You want to have some more fun, or you want to go somewhere. You're tired of kind of just, being locked into this financial thing or something like that. So that's another possibility, right? That you're actually searching for new financial opportunities. And I would say that the more you focus on, being active and fulfilling your responsibilities, especially with this stuff, right, you will be able to get to a more joyous and fulfilled place and whatnot, even if it's not this month, even if it's just initiated this month. But that is also a great way to potentially deal with these sorts of problems, because these houses are opposite, right, 4th and 10th. And so this would suggest that you definitely have the power to look at this objectively and discover a solution for it. So that's really cool. We already talked about the 11th house a bit, and I'm reminding you that it is aspected by the devil. It is aspected by the tower. So hopes and dreams and friendships and things like that are, kind of dark this month, I would say. And if you do have a friend that's going through a hard time, just do your best to hold space for them. Don't try to thrust like some sort of overly optimistic or giddy vision of the world upon them. Okay, it's not really gonna help them too much. Okay, and neither is logic, because the Queen of Swords is in the 12th for them, the 2 of Swords is in the 2nd for them. So they're bombarded by logic, and of course this is a swords card. They're just bombarded by a lot of, seemingly logical, rational, very impersonal kinds of people and situations. They probably don't feel important or loved or anything like that. So it's more important to hold a space of love for that person if they exist in your life than it is to judge them or try to solve their problem. That's just not going to help. Okay, I can't stress that enough. Okay, and finally the 12th house, which is the house of surrender and also kind of undoing, unconscious patterns that sort of get in our way. There's maybe a tendency here for, being too defensive about certain things to kind of get in your way, or being too logical about certain things to undermine your efforts and your hopes and your dreams and all that stuff. So I would kind of look at it that way. There may be sort of an inverted desire for justice as well, right? You want justice the way you imagine justice. And this card is, you know, in mutual aspect with the four corner cards, right? So you want the relationships to be the way you want them to be, or you think they should go. You want reality to conform to the way you feel like they should be. And this is kind of, you know, a card that can sometimes symbolize like a superiority inferiority complex, you know, like it's like I'm so great, look at what I'm doing, and I'm you know, I don't know, training to do all these great things and blah blah blah. So these kinds of things can easily also interfere with your plans and whatnot. Okay, so that's quite a lot to take in, but I hope that that will be helpful for you folks who are Aries ascendant, moon, or sun. Okay, have a great month, and I'll see you next time. Oh, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share, come find me on Facebook, check out my website if you want a reading, and all that good stuff. Alrighty, have a good one.